There was an impressive amount of talking about the Celestial Toymaker, but perhaps because there was so much to get frustrated about, perhaps it was a therapy session. Previously on Something Who. Welcome to the podcast where we take something old, a Doctor Who story from the original series, compare it with something new, one from the new series, and add something borrowed to make Something Who. Hello, I'm Richard, and we're back with Something Who podcast, episode 99. And this time we're looking at two stories involving that inveterate games player, the Toymaker, Celestial or otherwise. Initially we'll look at first Doctor story, The Celestial Toymaker, from season 3, and later we'll examine 14th and 15th Doctor adventure, The Giggle, from the 60th anniversary specials. And with me to decide whether these stories are a titanic struggle or a complete mismatch is a fantastic panel, starting with science and astronomy writer Giles. Hello, Giles.
Hello. Number 99. Does that mean I can have an ice cream?
If you could. If you catch the ice cream van.
Yeah, chance would be a fine thing.
And making another trip to the Something Who bunker, it's fandom's own musical maestro and Dudley Simpson aficionado, Jess Jurkovic.
Well, hello there. So glad to be back with you all.
Very good. And back once again is the multi-talented 3D artist, writer, researcher, podcaster and co-creator of Dalek 63-88. It's Gav Richard.
Hello.
Hey up.
Hi.
Hey up indeed, yeah.
I didn't add and background artist or whatever we're describing that.
Yes. We've been watching your exploits.
I can appear as a blur in the background of any production at a moment's notice.
Wow.
Splendid. Do we have anything we particularly wanted to witter on about, or should we just get straight into the stories?
Back half of the series, the new series. Yeah, I ended up blitzing it all. I was off on holiday in Germany for a few weeks, seeing the in-laws, and didn't manage to keep up with it while I was out there. So I kind of blitzed everything on the weekend that the final episode went out.
My goodness,
like everything from Dot and Bubble onwards. And yeah, I thought. Yeah, really enjoyed that. Had its ups and downs, but yeah, definitely good fun. Dot and Bubble, I think, was a mini masterpiece, considering it was the one I was thinking, not at all enthused about beforehand. And then really had a lot of impact on that. So I'll need to rewatch it all to actually formulate a proper opinion. But yeah, it's just a shame it's gone so quickly. Gone in a flash.
Yeah, I was thinking about the fact that there were some episodes that, for me, didn't quite hit the mark. And I think the reduced number of episodes in the season meant that any misses had a bigger impact, if you like. Because I remember back in 2005 being very upset about Boomtown. In retrospect, it's pretty great. But at the time, I remember saying to someone, or might even have put it online, you know, you've got 12 precious 45-minute slots, and why would you waste them on this nonsense? You know, I want everything to be an instant classic of the kind of top-notch dramatic spectacle of all of my favourite Doctor Who's, how dare you have a sort of quiet, introspective, downbeat, thoughtful character piece. And so I guess my point is that anything a little riskier that might be a bit out there is going to come under greater scrutiny as a virtue of the fact it's a greater percentage of the season. And because Russell historically has kicked off with a wackier, more whimsical season opener, and the likes of New Earth tend not to rank particularly highly, but they're designed to be big, mass appeal, silly, adventure, escapist fun. And I think Space Babies falls into that category. Wasn't one of my favourites, but I can see why he did it, to make a big sort of dramatic statement about how intensely off the wall Doctor Who can be. I mean, Stephen Moffat famously tried to do the reverse and have, season finales as your season openers. And I don't know that was any more successful. Did The Impossible Astronaut hook a new audience because it had the intensity of a season finale any better than Space Babies? I don't know. But I don't know many people that thought Space Babies was amazing. But it was fun, and it was fine. My favourites were the likes of 73 Yards. I love the atmosphere. I also love Rogue. Yeah, there were lots of highs and a few lows, and I wouldn't say there was much in the middle. And I think that's probably characteristic of a lot of Russell's stuff. He doesn't do mediocre. He knows what he wants to achieve, and whether you liked it is not the same as him not achieving what he set out to do.
Putting it that way, it reminds me of that Mitchell and Webb hit and miss sketch show. Where they used to they used to do cutaways to them behind the scenes discussing things while in the middle of recording, and they were going, well, okay, so I think the order should be hit, miss, hit, miss, hit.
Yeah.
It's funny. I mean, a lot of Space Babies, well, two obvious bits pertaining to bodily functions in different forms, and it just made me think of the fact that Russell has retrospectively reviewed, enjoyed, and is unrepentant about the burping wheelie bin, for example.
Yeah.
And so elements of a similar tone in Space Babies felt to me like him saying, well, if you didn't like my burping wheelie bin, you can jog on, get a load of this.
Yeah. I found myself unexpectedly enjoying Rogue the most. I mean, I didn't, going into it, think it was going to be my favourite, but just something about, I think, the dialogue and the fact that it was a complete sort of story, almost unmolested by much in the way of arc. So yeah, no, I really enjoyed that. I guess the other thing I'd say about Space Babies is I have a colleague who doesn't watch Doctor Who, thought she might have a go at it since it was Ncuti, she'd quite enjoyed in other things that he'd done, and got about halfway through Space Babies and said, no, this isn't for me. So yeah, I don't know. I mean, that's not to say that it didn't work for anyone. And in fact, if anything, I suppose, having looked online, everybody seems to agree that there's been good ones and bad ones, but there doesn't seem to be a massive consensus between who liked which one. So it seems like there's been hits and there's been misses, but they've been with different people.
Yeah, if the goal was to give a little something for everybody, that seems to have been a success.
Yes.
I think I agree, though, that if Space Babies was designed to bring new people in, I very much doubt that happened, because it's so outside of, well, I guess we could say a lot of this season is so surprising. And therefore, people could take it a different way, particularly the hardcore Doctor Who fans of old might find much to take umbrage with. As long as you're willing to set that aside, I thought the season was a really fun ride, really lots of unexpected turns. I think Russell Davies is excellent on those moments that you remember, those flashes of kind of inspiration. How he justifies that plot-wise or arc-wise, well, that'll settle later, maybe. I don't think it's quite the point, and I've almost never understood why it's so necessary to have arcs when many times I've found since 2005, those arcs have not landed, for me at least. When you grow up with the old series where each story is standalone to most degrees, you kind of get used to that, and you don't mind that there isn't a payoff necessarily at the end of the season. There can be something big that happens at the end of the season, but it doesn't, for me, have to be planted at the beginning to make it any more interesting or more satisfying, and especially if it doesn't happen. Although I'm getting the impression that maybe we're dealing with a multi-season arc. There are some things that definitely were not concluded, if you will, in this season, and maybe that's going to come in season 2 or series 14 or 15 or whatever we would like to call it. But just speaking viscerally, I really like this season. In general, that will probably settle after a while, as I become more analytical and can see it from a little distance. But I was actually quite amazed at I used the word before, I think I better use it again. The audacity of some of the choices here I thought was just amazing. Just really unexpected. And in that way, funny enough, I was open to Space Babies and I liked it. It was fun for me, but I had to decide right away, I've got to just go with this. There's no point in me getting mad about it.
Yeah.
I'm going to just go with it. That's not to say that I might hate it later. But that's kind of how I started. My first impressions, I've had a few more impressions because I did the episode of The Devil's Chord with you. So I'm a little bit more familiar with that one than the others. Yeah. Fun, a lot of great moments, and a lot of good humor that I appreciated. And you can certainly count on Russell Davies to give you those big moments.
I did wonder I heard a rumour apropos of, since we were talking about Devil's Chord last time, someone said to me that apparently there was talk that it was intended to be later in the run, and then it got brought forward for one reason or another, allegedly at some relatively early point, I guess. Because I kind of wondered whether if we'd had Church on Ruby Road like straight before and then gone into it, so Church on Ruby Road had functioned more as an opening episode for the season, as a whole. That being, although it was wacky in many ways, it was also a somewhat more straightforward adventure.
Yeah, and I was also just thinking in the context of taking all of the specials, including with David Tennant, into this as a single run. Then you've got two spaceship-based stories, relatively quick succession, showing you how Doctor Who can do them very differently. So again, it's that thing of, if you take these in isolation, then you might feel differently to taking them as part of a longer run where you see how experimental the format is. And if maybe we hadn't been waiting months for Space Babies, running off the back of a more serious episode, it might have not perturbed people quite so much. And it's funny, I mean, at the time I reviewed it very positively, and I do actually like it. I suppose when I say it's not how I would have opened the season, and this is a constant thing, and it has been true for 15 years. It's hard not to watch new Doctor Who worrying what other people think about it. And so sometimes I am desperately trying to let go, and I'm thinking, oh my goodness, what is a 60 or 70-year-old man thinking about this? So, I just wanted to lose myself in, for instance, watching Rogue, but it was really hard not to think like, oh, and I know what certain people are going to be saying about this. That taints it for me, and it shouldn't. But it's hard because we want everyone to love it. So we are so invested that it's hard to detach ourselves from just liking it on its own to, oh God, the internet's going to hate this, or Bob Smith down the road's going to hate this.
Yes,
True.
I think with that double whammy of off the wall stuff in the first two episodes being back to back, and both being very boundary pushing in their ways, and it's funny because it does also feel like Church on Ruby Road is very integrated into this series in a way that maybe some of the other Christmas specials and things like that have not been as much. We kept on revisiting it throughout, and being made aware that was a pivotal events. And okay, partly that's functioning as a reminder for it, but to actually go back to it it felt like maybe they pushed the scheduling slightly, and maybe it was all meant to come closer together. Who knows? It'll all come out in the wash, I guess.
Yeah. I could definitely believe that the Devil's Chord came earlier, because it sort of feels like the twist at the end thing is a better payoff when she's appeared more times than in that sort of just the third time we've seen her or something like that.
True.
Although, I mean, I guess you can say it's a forerunner of it rather than mopping it up as it might have been if it had appeared later on.
Yeah. But with the musical number of the Church on Ruby Road,
that
actually gave me a false impression of what the season was going to turn out to be.
Right.
I thought it was going to be far more musical. There's the hint of the jukebox and the TARDIS, and that kind of turned out to be, except for that lovely transition from the theme music into the opening scenes post-titles of The Devil's Chord. Did the jukebox have anything to do with anything? That's not necessarily bad, but all this signaling feels like if you're going to take the trouble to do it, you should go somewhere. Again, most satisfying for me how the end of The Devil's Chord was. I just thought we were going to get something like that in every story.
Right.
Would I have been truly ready for that? I don't know. I didn't have my hopes up actually after Ruby Road, and it definitely improved for me.
That again was another prime example of I would love to have just let go and enjoyed a musical number at the end of that episode, but I couldn't not think, oh, what are they doing? And it's tough because I know what a big chunk of the audience is thinking. In episode 2, you know, when we're hearing certain comments about the nature of the show, the direction it's taking, it's frivolous, or it's light entertainment, or it's just gonna, it's all gonna be musical numbers, and it just seemed to be reinforcing all of the fears that some people might have had. So yeah, I might have put something like 73 yards as number 2. So faster out of the gate, you just go, well, this can be a really terrifying ghost story type show as well. Or it could be musical next week, or it can be back to, and maybe a little bit of variety. But they were 2, as you say, quite audacious opening episodes for totally different reasons.
Yeah, I think I've got a higher embarrassment threshold now after having in the 90s to go into W.H. Smith in Winchester and, take Doctor Who monthly to the checkout. If you can manage that, then I think you can sort of sit and watch stuff,
you used to hide
on
it
the
in
telly.
top shelf magazines, didn't you?
That's what Matthew Jacobs suggested. I certainly can't confirm that rumour.
I certainly had a high embarrassment factor for a long time, which is probably why I didn't return to fandom until my mid-40s.
Yeah.
It was, not to put too fine a point on it, but it was very nerdy and embarrassing to be a Doctor Who fan in America when I was a kid and a teenager. So I went as far as teenager-dom and went to a few conventions, which was actually a lot of fun. But when I went into college, I was focusing on music, and Doctor Who kind of was still something I paid attention to, but it was not something I publicized. Now it's like a major part of my persona, if not public, then private.
Sure.
But I understand that feeling of a feeling that the program is yours, that proprietorial feeling that we all have about this show that we love. That's not wrong, but it is something to take a step back from and be able to observe and not make you a horrid person.
I mean, I guess the best extension of that probably is to say it's ours, and if you can look over your shoulder and see somebody enjoying it, that then the grown-up thing, I suppose, is to say, well, it wasn't for me this week, but look at all these people who thought it was great. And next week it might be for me. Yeah.
The question has to be asked, who is it for? And that's what keeps nagging at me. Because like you say, I'm not convinced Space Babies is the sort of mass appeal hook. And there's a lot of progressive stuff, and it's very diverse, and that will trigger certain darkest corners of the internet to rant and rave. But if that's supposed to be welcoming a new, young, accepting generation or generations, then that to me feels at odds with a huge build-up to a big reveal of a 40-year-old villain. I can't square those two approaches.
No. They've been trumpeting that segment of the audience that's sort of, late teens to late 20s, maybe even early 30s. So the fact that they've captured a large chunk of that segment. but that doesn't feel maybe that it's also going to either go to the other, to the very early age of the spectrum, the sort of, the kids that we were when we first started watching it, or perhaps the, as you say, the sort of older part of the audience either.
To my mind, all those inclusions can do is give newer viewers a sense of the history of the show. And that's exactly what happened when the Toymaker is introduced in the Giggle. We get a flashback, colorized flashback of the Celestial Toymaker. And so same thing with Sutek. Suddenly it's recognized, and we're not always seeing characters that the Doctor recognizes that we recognize, and that's an interesting twist. That's exactly what happens in the Celestial Toymaker. Like the meddling monk, the Doctor knows them, but we don't know them, and so there's a whole backstory that starts up there. That can be intriguing, and that can bring people on if they're willing to do the digging. That might very well bring people along. On a personal note, I had no idea why suddenly people were watching my Dudley Simpson video on Pyramids of Mars in masses until I finally watched the episodes. It's like, oh, lucky me.
and of course they have produced that Tales in the TARDIS mini-sode with the new edit of Pyramids as well. So that is, as you say, it's a route into the show's history. But again, it does sort of feel like, and I think this is probably because it's true, it feels like there's two forces pulling in opposite directions. One of which says, this is day one. We have started Doctor Who today, and this is series one. Off you go. And there are other forces saying, yes, but this show existed before, don't forget. So I guess because that's actually the case, that is inevitably going to have side effects.
One part radical, one part reactionary. If you take out the political overtones there, that's kind of the idea.
Yeah.
It's a very different approach to what they had last time they had to relaunch it. But on the other hand,
little breadcrumbs.
It hasn't been off the air for 15 years this time. So.
And then big debates about, was Paul McGann deliberately left off, and what's in the canon and what's not, and all of these questions as we were, because it was essentially because of the Time War in 2005 getting mentioned. There was almost a sense that this show had been reset. There were things that the classic audience of Doctor Who might have watched it for its original 26 years, this show is new to them, to us, because they won't know what the Time War is. All of these, he's suddenly the last of the Time Lords. So there was a load of stuff in 2005 that was new to every part of the audience, and then we all slowly discovered it together. But this time, it's dumping all of the history of Doctor Who on iPlayer and saying this is 60 plus years of stuff, whilst also saying this is a brand new show, so you don't have to know anything about it before. And trying to satisfy everyone is tricky.
Shall we move into talking about the two stories, and maybe we'll, more of that will come out, I guess, as we discuss them. Okay, so we're now talking about The Giggle, which was written by Russell T Davies and directed by Chanya Button. Who was to kick us off with some thoughts about The Giggle?
It's maybe the version of the Toymaker that we needed 60 years ago. So many of the fantastical ideas that 1966 just couldn't manage or had to realize in a maybe more mundane way, less inspired way. Now we can take advantage of modern technology, CGI and the like, and make a story which kind of does more justice to the character of the Toymaker and the world that they inhabit, and also give them a bit more logic. I was just complaining about that in our last conversation. I feel like there's a bit more pain is given in the script to explain the Toymaker's place in our universe. And that that helps. That helps make it a little bit more of a easier pill to swallow, this strange creature for whom our normal rules don't apply. So really interesting that this character, yet again, had so much power in some people's minds, perhaps just Russell T. Davis's mind, that he thought it was a worthy adversary to return. And I think we'll talk about the result.
Who's next? Well, let me have a crack. I think it's visually very impressive. There's beautiful scenes, historic and present day. As Jess was saying, it's realised in a very impressive way, in a way that we never could have had something in 1966. There's kind of two parts to it. There's the sort of creepy scene set in the past, and there's the kind of huge spectacle of the present day, and those are sort of intertwined together. And the creepy sort of doll stuff, which in the end doesn't really go anywhere, but that sort of definitely harks back to the original story. And games playing again and again, quite simplistic games.
On the whole, I absolutely love this, but there does seem to be two conflicting elements. Until this rewatch, I'd completely forgotten all of the stuff about how everyone thought they were right. That was completely lost to me until I rewatched this. It felt like Russell was very upset about the internet and Twitter, and he felt like he wanted to get something off his chest about how ugly people could be. And the scene with Kate Stewart taking her band off was very unpleasant. Good drama, interesting, thought-provoking, but very much at odds with the totally escapist Toymaker element. The whole thing of people believing they're right is very modern and very uncomfortable to listen to, especially Kate Stewart's comments. And yet the threat of the Toymaker is so far removed from that, and his powers trivialise all our everyday worries. So they kind of don't feel like they belong in the same story. And like you say about the dolls, although it doesn't go anywhere, I do love the dolls as a little set piece, but it doesn't have any consequence. It doesn't play out. It's just a moment of the Toymaker's whimsy. And the people believing they're right doesn't go anywhere. He turns the world into chaos, and at some point we don't see it, but that stops happening. So it doesn't bother me a great deal. It doesn't undermine my enjoyment overall, but there's a few wrinkles in this that just perturb me a little bit. But overall, I absolutely love it, and it gets off to such a flying start. Just the speed of movement from scene to scene, and the sense of pace and the sense of fun. You get through 10 minutes in the blink of an eye, and there is a sense of genuine friendship and family with the Doctor and Kate, and then he meets Mel, and although the Mel thing is a little bit, we might come back to Mel, but overall I think it's terrific, and it gets off to a terrific start.
Giles?
So coming into this, I think with the prelude and everything, and focusing on John Logie Baird and all of that stuff, it does feel rather like this should have been. I know that we were talking about the centenary of the BBC. Obviously, the BBC having its origins in radio rather than, we weren't talking about the centenary of television. But it does feel like this was far more keyed into feeling like it should have been something to do with the centenary of the BBC than the Power of the Doctor that we had the previous year. And I think that sort of setup and everything is very clever. It's very reminiscent for me of Last of the Time Lords, or with the sound of drums, possibly more in in there's certain bits that are more or less remixes of elements of that, I think. So the swanky unit bass, the musical number, and things like that. Although it's done in a very bravura way, and I don't think it does any harm to to revisit these things. They're kind of Doctor Who's stock in trade these days anyway. But yeah, I take your point, Gav, that does feel like some of these things are a bit disjointed in terms of what the Toymaker scheme, or the chaos elements and this thing of wanting to have this satirical or topical political element in there does feel disconnected from a lot of the rest.
So, Jess, what about this musical arpeggio, chuckle, giggle sort of thing? I mean, an arpeggio is a very common thing in music.
It is.
Has it ever sounded like a laugh to you before Russell T Davies pulled that out of his imagination?
I can certainly see how it could. I might imagine laughter more in a melodic sense.
Yeah.
Laughter might be a little bit more chromatic or a little disjointed, depends on the person. Actually, one thing that I enjoyed discovering about the Celestial Toymaker when we talked about it was that Clara the clown was supposed to deliver her lines in a sing-song kind of way.
Right.
It doesn't really come off that way. She's just sort of squeaky. But there do seem to be a few uncertain, half-hearted efforts at there being a kind of pitch to it when she says, "How are you?" Things like that. It wasn't stuck with. But this idea is really sort of taken to the fore there. And it's interesting. It certainly works. It's certainly catchy and simple, and therefore, kind of resonates a lot with, well, everybody. So I think ultimately it works. It's simple and effective and direct, and could be plausible as something that will infect our ears and our brains without our knowledge. It's the most simple of earworms, you might say.
Yeah. I mean, the only thing I can think of that's similar would be Woody Woodpecker.
Agreed.
You're right. There's something very similar about that. Absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah, it's a simple, powerful idea, and I think that's Russell at his best, is taking a thought and running with it.
For sure. Doctor Who does great things when they take little simple ideas, familiar ideas, whether it's, turning plastic dolls into killers or something like this. Doctor Who can really run with that idea. It is sort of impressive, however, that Donna figures it out kind of lickety-split. It's impressive. We've not known her as a musical type, and it's explained pretty well, pretty quickly, or perhaps glibly.
Yeah.
But this is exactly the sort of thing that the new series, since 2005, has never had the time for. You just have to say it, go with it, accept it, and the plot moves on from B to C.
Like discovering that Rose was a bronze medal winning gymnast
Quite.
in the first episode.
Yeah.
Doctor surrounds themselves with only talented people.
Yeah.
But it was cool. However, it was absolutely correct that Miss Bonnie Langford demonstrated the giggle, the arpeggio, perfectly.
Yes.
As she would, star of stage. That was fun.
Just before we leave the opening of this story too far behind, Giles mentioning John Logie Baird reminded me, if I'd been casting this, I would not have cast an actor that looked like Mark Gatiss in makeup. I found John Logie Baird
Hadn't occurred to me.
so distracting.
Me neither.
I kept looking, thinking, that is Mark Gatiss. No, it's not. Wait, no, it is Mark Gatiss. No, it's not. It's an actor. I might have just steered. Maybe I'm the only person that has thought.
I don't think you meant that.
It's an actor.
Sorry, Mark. If you're listening. I didn't mean that.
Yeah. So, and also on the intro, it's interesting that Russell T Davies explicitly says in the commentary that he's making the Toymaker racist, calling back to the previous story. With his stupid German accent, and then the Sonia Climbs comment.
Yes.
Yeah, the Sonia Climbs more legit, but I don't know that it needed doing. But
no.
But also, white guys taking the piss out of white guys has never been a hot potato. So doing a German accent, it's not really in the same ballpark, is it? There's no great history of oppression of the German people. I don't know.
Yeah.
There might be some pretty choice cartoons from the 1940s. Check out some Bugs Bunny cartoons. They might not be too complimentary of Germans.
Oh yeah,
but then there was a lot of
I think that comes from a slightly
different,
slightly different perspective.
Oh, for sure.
Yeah, I just think he's overthought that a little bit. But the whole thing of the accents, I don't care for the explanation.
Yeah.
I just love it. I just love the mad German, stupid, broken English nonsense. Yeah. It's wonderful. Just
he does a bit of French again later, doesn't he? As well,
yeah.
Doesn't he?
He does a few.
Yeah.
Franglais, and as with quite a few things, I haven't really been ingesting much of the behind the scenes puffery and stuff with anything to do with new series, but
nor
I seem to quite often end up hearing about these things at second hand, and I end up being quite happy to take what I've seen on the screen and go, yeah, okay, cool,
Yes.
yeah, and then I hear some bit of justification of it from going from behind the scenes. Oh, this is why we did that, or whatever, and then I think, oh, really? And that sort of grates with me more than
because that Sonny Climbs line, you can take that as the Toymaker being an unpleasant person, knowing the effect that comment will have on that man.
Yeah.
But to say instead that that's not the intention, that he's just prejudiced about the way he looks at people and makes assumptions, is, to me, less effective, but also certainly less effective coming from a god that doesn't come from our universe. Why he would make a comment about skin tone is just bonkers.
Yeah.
Sorry, so am I right in understanding? So he makes out that the German accent thing is a reference to the Toymaker's previous cultural appropriation.
I guess so, yeah.
And then on the other hand, comes up with some kind of secondary motivation for the Sonny Climbs thing.
Well, I guess the idea is that he's just that he's fundamentally an English alien who's so contemptuous about foreigners that he dresses like them, he impersonates them, and he makes racist comments about their skin tone. I don't know.
Yeah. Anyway,
I think the explanation is a bit strained. It doesn't need that kind of explanation for it to be justified in the Toymaker's character. Fine, like it instantly paints him as a unpleasant, slimy kind of character. Great.
Yeah.
We don't necessarily need justification that there was cultural appropriation in 1966. True, but it's not necessary.
Yeah.
And it just it's also the sort of thing that should have had a payoff and never did. It was just there as a character touch. And that's usually the sort of thing, well, we actually see that in another episode this season. There's usually some sort of payoff to that, or we see it come back in the end, and it doesn't. It's just a character touch. Not that there's anything wrong with character touches.
Yeah, because he doesn't make any comment really about Dr. 15, does he? In the
no.
Yeah.
Oh,
right, which would in fact make some sense.
Yeah. I like that we also see the Toymaker sort of reveling in the discord. Early on, he sort of suddenly appears dancing and waving, and then disappears again. But I guess it's him sort of reveling in the chaos that he's causing.
Yeah, Murray Gold indulges in just a little bit of goofy, sinister music there, but not very much. In fact, I had to say, I thought his score was effective, but really quite restrained. There's not very much that stuck out to me, although admittedly, I was probably pretty spellbound with the story and I wasn't necessarily absorbing everything. But there's one moment of Murray Gold's score that you cannot miss, and that is when he slaps us in the face with the giggle when the Toymaker is waving at the doctor in the melee in the street.
That's true.
Which is actually sort of hilarious. I mean, okay. There it is. There's the giggle. Thank you for reinforcing it. But, it didn't smack me as anything more than just, I will play these 7 notes, there they are. Just to remind you, and or not just remind you, but make it abundantly clear. That's the challenge, isn't it? You have to find that balance. Murray Gold is certainly capable of marvelous music that everybody remembers. He can go over the top a little bit more than other composers, certainly than Sagan Akinola ever did.
There's one other thing to do with the opening, because I'm watching this, and then after I watched this, I went back to watch the last 5 minutes of Wild Blue Yonder to remind myself of how we got to this point and where we came in. And obviously, the thing that stands out is sadly Bernard Cribbins not being around for this bit. But the thing that I actually wanted to mention was the plane crash. Yeah, and that gets shown. You get the plane crash at the end of Wild Blue Yonder. Apparently, a plane crashing over central London, and then you get the recap of it with the pilots when they get to unit headquarters.
Oh, I forgot that was there, actually.
And without wishing to. Without wanting to be morbid, that struck me as an insanely risky thing to put into 2 of your episodes.
Yes.
2 of your 3 big special episodes that you're doing. Considering
just in case.
Considering the BBC's long track record, there is a very long track record of them putting shows where there's sensitive topics that are in the news. Yeah, I don't know. And we had the beheading issue back with when we did Robot of Sherwood, didn't we? And they were to make a cut to that. Whether they planned it so they could cut around it if they absolutely had to or something, I don't know. But just struck me as a big thing. It just made me slightly wince when I saw it.
That's true, because there's no time to dwell on it in the way that perhaps you should as a human being.
Well, when it is a very horrific event and somewhat more realistic and horrifying in its implications than a bunch of chefs having a fight outside the back door of a pizza restaurant and some bloke facing off a taxi and saying, I can walk down the road.
Yeah.
So it feels that units come into a bit of money since the Chris Chibnall era.
Yes.
Quite so.
I'm not sure if they have the whole of the skyscraper, but they've certainly got the top of it, which is usually the most expensive bit, isn't it?
Yeah,
I think the whole building's theirs.
Well, Russell does like ripping off his Avengers iconography for unit stuff. Again, coming back to Last of the Time Lords with the shield, heli carrier thing that we had in that.
Unit should have had sponsored by Disney on the wall.
Yeah,
brought to you by.
Yeah,
yes,
yeah, and the commentary makes clear that the Vlinx is supposed to be alien technology which they've repurposed.
I found the sudden appearance of the Vlinx really odd as the sudden appearance of Mel, in a way that I thought would get more play.
Yeah.
And yes, Mel at least gets a little moment later. But it's just a bit odd. The Doctor turns up and Mel is just there, and he meets her at the moment the audience does. There's no sort of preamble. And then as soon as she's introduced, if you edit out that moment of the Doctor being shocked that she's there, she would just be another person in the room for almost all of that story. That's not to say she's not worth having, but it just feels like, even with the bits of conversation about her having travelled with the Doctor before, I still feel like there's something missing. There was a train of thought about her being there that I'm not privy to, other than, wouldn't it be amazing if Bonnie Langford was in this? And the Vlinx, I feel that even more so. I'd feel like I'd turned over 2 pages at once, because the Doctor he's just there, Doctor accepts it, and it, to me, felt like they were going to circle back round to that. Like the Vlinx being there was so incongruous, and the Doctor kind of says, "Hello, the Vlinx," but in such a way that you kind of think he must surely think this is a bit weird, and we must circle back to this later. And maybe the Vlinx has been placed as part of some alien ploy. And no, he's just there. He's just a thing. He's just the new K9.
Yeah, I'd completely forgotten until rewatching it until you brought it up again now, in fact, that it's that instant, it's that glossed over and not. I think I'd made up in my head, oh yeah, there's a couple of lines about him being crashed alien technology or something that they've repurposed or something, and obviously I just made that up completely in my brain to just bridge the gap and make a connection. I mean, at least with Mel, we've had the scene at the end of Power of the Doctor with the companion support group, and so we'd had it back already, and that I just went back on the transcript and checked, and Kate Stewart's in that already, talking about potentially wanting to recruit people for some of the ex-companions to do some stuff for UNIT.
Yeah, it's a bit like Matt Smith having a head of a Cyberman for a companion. You know, it's not really explained. It's just you just have to accept that it's there, I guess.
Yeah.
For me, Russell Davies does that a lot, which can make his scripts very engaging, but too often don't stand up to a lot of scrutiny. They are full of feels, which, of course, I hook into very easily. But then scrutiny then makes you wonder, all right, so here's this idea and here's this idea, and we'll call the planet Midnight, and we'll just let's see what sticks. I just, I feel like Russell Davies is like that. He's an ideas person, and he will run with ideas, but he'll throw too many ideas in, and some of these ideas are just used, kind of like you were saying, Gav, as set pieces that don't go anywhere. Not that that's automatically bad, but I guess this is just one more in those list of things that I'm compiling just to confirm that 45 minutes to an hour is just not enough for a good Doctor Who episode. In my life, it just never has been. 4 episodes at 25 minutes. So here's my reactionary nature coming out. But, an hour and a half is a nice, good time to tell a story. 45 minutes... Things get rushed. Things get skipped over. You have to, by necessity, run through everything without spending any time explaining things that I think the audience deserves to have some explanation to. Not just it being a quirky thing or a fun thing for fans to remember. Oh, look, it's Mel. Fantastic. But that's it. It's just there for almost for its own sake.
Yeah.
And that's something that's, as much as I love Davis's writing, and I find it really exciting, and so many of his stories are a lot of fun. That's a common fault that I keep running into.
I mean, I didn't have too much of a problem with either the Blinks or Mel, but I think this sort of speaks to that, what we were saying at the start about not quite knowing where this is meant to land in terms of how much backstory, how invested are people who are watching this meant to be in the lore of Doctor Who and things, because the thing that really grated with me, or sort of, well, didn't grate, but I just thought, oh yeah, okay, I had to struggle to remember this particular plot point, was the fact that they were waiting on, they said, oh well, all the world leaders have fallen victim to the signal, and we can't shoot down this satellite without permission. And then they wait for the Doctor gives permission. Remember that bit?
Yes.
Is this because he's still president of the universe?
And this is because he's still president of Earth.
Oh.
As set up in the Witches Familiar or whatever.
Yeah.
Those Capaldi episodes. Well, presumably that's the protocol that's being invoked, that he can take action when he's authorised to give the orders. I was thinking,
miss those.
This could be.
Yeah.
But I was also thinking, okay, we could have had a nod, and you didn't repeat that whole thing, but you could just have like one more line of debate between the Doctor and between the Doctor and Kate, just with no one can give us responsibility, and they'll say, well, I'm taking responsibility to shoot that thing down now.
Yeah,
I'll answer to everyone later.
Yeah, I mean, they had long enough, however, to have a whole load of stuff about Sabalom Glitz.
Yes.
Which you got to. I mean, also, how old is Mel? Because if she stuck with him till he was 101, then she's got to be in her 70s.
I'll tell you, Selby wasn't that.
Yeah,
it's interesting. Just going back to what you were saying, Giles, about a potential callback to something we don't remember, but actually makes sense if you connect all the dots. And I think that's why I felt a bit odd about Mel and the Vlinks, because they were both treated in virtually the same way when they were introduced in terms of explanation and screen time.
Yeah.
And if you were a long-standing fan of the show, then the sudden appearance of Mel and the Doctor going, "Oh wow," and accepting it and moving on.
Yeah.
And you as a long-standing fan would go, "Oh, how wonderful!" Versus
one of
the
these
Vlinks,
things is not like the other.
which,
yeah,
exactly.
And
the Doctor goes, "Oh wow, here's a weird thing." Accepted, done. And so you're kind of on the back foot, going, "Oh, was the Vlinks in something? Should I? Was this in Torchwood, or what have I forgotten?
Maybe
Why
there's
is
some
why is there not a big conversation about the Vlinks?" And it's that thing of like, what do I know? What do I not know?
Maybe it was in class.
It would be impossible to
How
know.
would we know?
Yeah. There's a line later on where the Doctor seems to be worried about the fact that he might be responsible for the Toymaker having found his way into the world.
Oh wow! So in the Celestial Toymaker, he says people come to him,
Yeah.
and he traps them,
Yes.
and they play his games, and if they lose, they are turned into toys, and then he can play with them whenever he wants to. And as I was saying earlier, there's some discrepancy as to what that entails. In this, the Toymaker, as you say, there's a special set of circumstances that has brought the Toymaker into our universe, because the Doctor scattered salt at the edge of creation. But then that made me think about the thing in the Toymaker that is a question that's never answered, is how do people get to the Toymaker? Because the TARDIS lands in the Toymaker's realm because it's a ship that can cross the barriers of time and space and dimensions. But how did George and Margaret, who later became the clowns, end up in the Toymaker's realm? Presumably they did not have a TARDIS of their own.
No.
So there's this oddity of how do these universes collide if you don't have the Doctor in the mix. And the Doctor addresses it in the Giggle. He says he's sort of broken the rules of the universe, and now the Toymaker's been unleashed, and now all of the mad stuff that the Toymaker can do in his world, he can now do it in the world that we're used to. But yeah, that kind of threw me back to wondering, because we're told that the Toymaker's realm, he says something, one of Russell's wonderful word salads, something about the under-universe.
Yes, yeah.
A hollow in the under-universe or something like that, which is nice, but nonsense. But doesn't explain how Sergeant Rugg and Mrs. Wiggs ended up in the under-universe. I don't know if you had a question there, but I don't know if that was an answer to it.
Yes and no.
Yeah. Donna, I think it's quite a good story for her. She gets quite a lot to do early on, at least. And I guess the reaction to being lost in the maze, which is sort of frightening, but she's a tough cookie and she comes through it okay.
Glorious. Absolute. I mean, just Donna kicking 7 bells out of some babies. Just phenomenal.
Yes.
Oh, that scene is fantastic.
I just thought,
she's super.
This is proper Doctor Who. Just kick the life out of some little babies. It's great.
I do like that. The human puppet. Is very effective, and I guess is a nod back to the thing of the Toymaker making playthings out of people.
You lose his games and you become a toy. But then the Stookie family seem to be the reverse, which may be what the playing cards were in the Hart family and the Celestial Toymaker, because they are toys brought to life. And some people are people turned to toys.
So maybe it's it just cuts both ways, really. And it's nice that I'd forgotten that the ball thing at least gets once you know where it's going. Once you've seen the end of it, and it's nice that at least it's seeded earlier with the juggling and that first.
It's the oldest game in the world, or something, or the first game of all. Yeah.
I do have a bone to pick with that. Shall I pick it now?
Go on then.
Go on then.
I don't mind the idea of catch being the ultimate simple game, I think that really works. But the problem is, as a game, as a competitive element, it's too simple. Because why, as the 14th Doctor points out, would the 15th Doctor ever do anything other than the easiest throw to his teammate?
Yes.
So what are the rules in that game of catch? You know, how close do you have to throw it to the Toymaker for it to be a valid throw, for the Toymaker to have to try to catch to win or lose? Like, why just throw it over the edge immediately and then say, well, you didn't catch it, you lose. And then added to that, the victory, there's no good reason why the Toymaker fumbles that final ball.
It feels like there should be a distraction. Something should...
Exactly, If the playing against two Doctors was beneficial somehow, in that one of them distracted him while the other one threw it, and that caused the fumble. Yeah, although the whole game of the ball was seeded, the ultimate conclusion was, I kind of felt like there was a missing piece of logic in that progression to the final victory. And I don't fundamentally, I don't think it's complex enough as a game for the Toymaker to play in any competitive sense, because it's
considering the Celestial Toymaker spent ages spelling out the rules, spelling out in minute detail the rules of very simple very simple games. It feels like we don't get that detail at all here.
There's another non sequitur when he says he absolutely won't cheat. It's it's not his nature, and yet the characters in Celestial Toymaker do nothing other than cheat the whole way through.
Yeah.
And he specifically instructs ahead of the dancing game. He turns up and says to Rug and Wiggs, whatever you do, stop them getting to the TARDIS. That's the one thing you have to do. I mean, there is no game in that sequence. It is another confusing nonsense.
Although, in Celestial Toymaker, the Toymaker's only attempt at cheating is perhaps that pushing ahead of the trilogic game.
Right.
He doesn't actually do any of the cheating. It's the people the creatures he's imprisoned that he's turned into toys. They're the ones who are cheating. And that's understandable because they're desperately trying to get out, which is, what makes a nonsense both of Dodo's idea that, well, if you explain it to the King and Queen of Hearts, I'm sure they'd help us. No, they wouldn't. And second of all, it also makes a nonsense of why necessarily the Toymaker won't cheat in his games, because he too is, he may be bound by the rules, but he also wants to win. He's given that competitive. It's one of the main marks of his character is that competition is the thing, playing the games, but winning is also part of that.
Yes, and he's a bad loser, as we've established in.
We have. So it doesn't quite follow that he would automatically follow the rules. And the other thing about the game of catch, which I found interesting, is although it's somewhat similar to Blind Man's Buff, it's a totally different type of, what would you say, intelligence, brain, power.
Yeah.
This is an athletic game, rather than a game of the mind, like the complete opposite of catch is the trilogic game. And so obviously there's some physical elements in Blind Man's Buff, but there's also like memory and coordination with your partner who's giving the signals as to where to go. So there's more than just that raw physical, those attributes that you have to have in order to compete at this game of catch. So
it's what you're saying is it's ableist.
There you go. Where would Ryan have been if he'd been?
Well, I mean,
involved.
I was thinking about the fact we'd already had a PC question mark joke about the scientific advisor whose name I forget.
Shirley,
yeah,
Shirley, yeah.
Which I really enjoyed. That it was a self-aware PC joke where Donna made a comment and then second guessed herself, and I think that's nice because a lot of us are doing that. We're trying to be better people, but to then have a game which certain people could absolutely not have participated in, while she's literally in the background.
I think one thing that, because some of the conversation in the corridor after that first meeting, when they're trapped in the corridors and so on, and the doctors seems to be freaking out a bit. I mean, that struck me as being a little bit subpar and a little bit on the nose, discussing the doctor's, the doctor being quite open that he was sort of freaking out and about the, meeting the Toymaker again and all of that. It struck me as a wee bit first draft, like, you'd change things. And then the thing is, I kind of felt with the discussion of the Toymaker, nobody's ever made, I don't think it gets brought up in this, and it certainly doesn't get brought up in Toymaker. But the fact these are such simplistic games that he's playing, and that the lack of, because the thing that occurred, the thing that I made the connection with was actually the Eternals from Enlightenment. That I was thinking, this idea of, yes, he's immortal and all powerful, but he's got no imagination of his own, or that sort of. I thought you could take that idea and the fact that these are the best games that he can come up with.
But not only that,
he has just such a limited imagination, or he has to.
But he's not even playing himself. He's watching a grown man dressed as a schoolboy playing.
Yeah.
These games.
He's discovered Twitch about 50 years earlier, right?
He's watching people doing an escape room rather than doing it himself.
So I did think I wouldn't necessarily expect anything more of Toymaker itself after, especially given the mess that the writing of it was. But you'd think, okay, in the hands of Russell, you would think he would potentially see this issue and maybe want to illuminate it a bit. And instead, nearly all of the Toymakers, sort of conversations and so on are either oblique or they're just about goading the Doctor. About, and when you have some fairly on the nose dialogue going on elsewhere in various scenes involving the Doctor, both that bit and towards the end. It feels a bit like there was an open goal there that could have retroactively made Celestial Toymaker, improved it somewhat.
Yeah.
By giving us a different understanding of what the Toymaker's motives were.
He's seen episode 2 of the Toymaker, and he doesn't like all that messing around. So he says, "I tell you what, I'm going to cut the cards from my." Oh, hang on a minute, cut the cards. There's a good idea. I'll maybe use that again. I like the puppet show. I mean, I'm not. Again, it's another one where I'm not quite sure exactly where it goes, but it's a brilliant piece of visual.
It was just an excuse to have a massive dig at Stephen Moffat killing Clara.
Yes.
That might be my all-time favourite line.
Yes.
Just joyful.
She was killed by a bird. Whatever.
I made a joke on Twitter yonks ago about the death of Clara, but my take on it was that she hadn't read the small print, because she'd basically it was a technical error, like a contractual error that she hadn't quite understood.
Yeah.
Because she did a thing thinking that it would be fine, but she hadn't fully understood all of the rules.
Yeah.
And she died as a consequence. But summarising it as killed by a bird, I can't beat that. Beautiful.
Bro. Spice up your life. What do you think of that, Jess?
Good fun. I was not a Spice Girls boy, but doesn't matter. Yet another in a long line of tunes brought into modern Doctor Who. Well, I guess that's certainly happened all throughout the history. It's certainly fun. We get another callback in that there's a dance number, but it's flipped on its head in that it's the Toymaker who's doing the dancing, not his toys. And it's great. Actually, I mean, spectacle. We can certainly count on Davis for that. It's a lot of fun, and it demonstrates that he can move far more than he can in his Mandarin outfit. He's much more.
True.
He's got much more agility, which is nice to see.
I noticed when he disappears at the end, drops through the floor,
Yeah.
there's a little honk honk, little clown.
Yes,
Oh,
there
right,
is,
yes.
isn't there? Yes.
Oh, right.
Yeah.
Fun.
Yes, and a couple of little things in that sequence. They mentioned Triad gets a mention as being the computer system or language that
Indeed.
they're using, and we get the thing about something hidden, and the one who waits, and
Yeah.
but I wonder about the someone else's game, because he said, "Oh, that's someone else's game," and I wonder whether that's just a reference to Sutek or whether that's
Yeah,
or whether
the
that's
one
to do
who
with
waits, I
Mrs.
think,
Flood.
is Sutek.
Yeah, well, clearly the one who waits is Sutek, but there's someone else's game thing. I wonder whether that's something to do with Mrs. Flood.
Oh. No, I took that
Pond
all
over.
to be Sutek, but
Probably, but
I'm not sure.
that Mrs. Flood's clearly up to something.
Yeah, the Toymaker wouldn't play a game with the one who waits. But, yeah, go back to my previous point that Sutek's a fairly powerful alien, but his powers don't seem to match anything like what the Toymaker can do. He transcends all the laws of physics in a way that... I mean, if Sutek could turn bullets into flowers, he wouldn't be trapped by a force field in a chair projected from Mars. He would just click his fingers and that force field would be gone. So these are beings in different leagues that have been shunted together.
Yeah, I mean, he'd have taken Sutek for a walk if it was a game, I suppose. But, it's just a chore, so he leaves that to the Doctor.
Richard, if I may ask, how did you feel about the line that the Toymaker beat God? Did that perturb you in any way?
It kind of bounced off me. It wasn't specific enough. I was more upset with certain lines in Boom this year, but again, I mean, it wasn't the end of the world. Yeah, I think first time round, whilst RTD's obviously humanist, there's respect in things like Gridlock, and there's others that I don't spring to mind instantly as well. It feels like second time round there's a bit less respect on offer. And look, I mean, I can't deny that a lot of people claiming to be Christian are kind of supporting people who I don't like very much. And Russell won't like that either. So, there's reason why he might sort of feel that that's the bad guy right now. But it can be problematic for a show that is at its heart, I think, trying to be inclusive.
It's funny, really, if he, as an atheist, has written a line that there is no God. God is canon in the Doctor Who universe, but the Toymakers come from another universe and might be more powerful, so it's a bit of a mad...
Yeah, that's a good point. I don't know, is maybe Russell agnostic? I don't know. I mean, or maybe he is atheist, I don't know. Maybe,
thought he was atheist.
Yeah, maybe it kind of depends what he's up to.
Sure.
I mean, I'm sure. Anyway, it doesn't really matter.
The Master in the Gold Tooth was a pretty joyful inclusion for me.
Indeed.
Yes.
And then the hand taking it away.
Yeah.
Oh yeah,
There's a little reference to the taking of the ring.
Yes.
Mrs. Trefusis again.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. Which I don't know where we're going next. By generation, maybe.
Well, I was just going to say just before.
Yeah.
I mean, as part of that same scene, but I was struck by having seen everything that the Toymaker can do.
Yeah.
Bullets into flowers and all of that, and then they're in abject panic when he gets hold of the galvanic beam that unit have developed. That seemed silly.
Yeah, they're worried it's going to be turned into zinc.
Yeah.
And the Doctor's, the fact he makes the offer, says, "Oh, come away with me." Kind of
play endless games.
We can play endless games because yes, you do wonder whether he's
we can be celestial.
Yes.
But as usual, the baddie has found greater things than the Doctor. They found the spoils of Earth.
Yes.
And that's what must be stopped.
We're so special.
Rather.
Yeah.
You wonder whether that's a serious offer.
Yeah, I found the shooting of the Doctor at the time genuine shock and really effective.
Yes.
Yes.
Yes, we're not expecting it, are we? We're expecting it at the end of the episode.
No, and I like I love the Toymaker's justification of it.
Yeah.
The rules say I have to play the next game against the next you, which is actually, wow, that was pretty shocking.
Yeah, basically best of three again. Third Doctor.
Yes.
At that point, I'd sort of forgotten about Ncuti turning up at some point. So, yeah, really good, effective, exciting, genuine surprise and confusion.
Yes.
And I like the what joke as well. That was a nice little.
Yeah, lots of little callbacks. 14 recalls a couple of regeneration lines when he's about to go. The moment's been prepared for, I think, and he even quotes the Brigadier when the third's about to regenerate into the fourth. Here we go again. So nice. Thank you for the callbacks. Appreciate that. But as we've now seen for a season, Ncuti just shines on the screen. I love watching him in everything. I'll say it right now. I love how no one said a word that he isn't wearing any trousers. and no one says a word. And it's just sort of accepted that is how it is. And even when he's alone in the TARDIS, I was half hoping that after he's taken off in the TARDIS and he's left 14 to go with Donna and have his family, I was half hoping he would suddenly look down at his legs. Like that would have been chef's kiss if that would have happened. But okay, there it is.
Yeah. I absolutely loved him in this story when I saw it first, and I still love him now. I guess my only tiny caveat is he doesn't feel exactly the same character in this story as I've come across in the season just watched.
I agree. I was thinking exactly the same thing. And I think I like him better in the end of the Giggle.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree.
And I can't quite put my finger on it. I think he's a little bit more contained in the Giggle. And he's such a charismatic actor. And I think he dials it. And I think David Tennant's a little bit guilty of this. Dialing it up too much, thinking that by going further, it's better. But sometimes, less is more. And when Ncuti's just quiet and powerful, it is so good. And I get less out of it when he's bursting with energy and being over the top. And I felt that a lot of the time through David Tennant's tenure is when he's trying to fill the room, that I just wish he'd dial it back a little bit.
Yeah, there's a lot of manic, and we get that from the Master's regenerations as well, is that there's an expectation of manic behavior as being more compelling and more interesting. It certainly grabs your attention, but it can wear on a person, and you have to judge those moments very carefully as to when you're going to do that. Tennant has some very dramatic scenes in this well before his bi-generation. He certainly gives it his all. You know, there's a little bit of spittle going here and there, and that's good. Nothing wrong with that at all. That's that challenge, though, is that balance, that it can't be all that. And you're totally right then that in contrast, Ncuti comes off as sage and wise. And you're right. I hadn't thought about that until you brought that up, Gav, but that would have been a nice, interesting change from someone who is clearly so young and effervescent, young seeming, and full of life, as we certainly see in Church on Ruby Road. That would have been an interesting twist. I think there is a fear that such performances will not be interesting to watch. And I think that's really the danger, is that you would need the right actor to pitch their performance in just the right way for that to work. It's a dangerous choice because it can come off as flat if you're not doing it well. So
it's tricky. I feel like it works here because he definitely comes over as the older Doctor.
yes, for sure.
The way he's comforting Tennant, as it were, a couple of scenes even before it's made explicit with the whole stuff about rehab and so on. The stuff in the aftermath of the end of the once they defeated the Toymaker is nice. I didn't feel it was whether he's kind of bottling it up and sort of jumping ahead. He appears to want to just go and sneak off at the end. He goes, "Hey, I've got the TARDIS now," and I don't feel there's too much of a jar in character development because I kind of feel like, okay, he's behaving that way, and then once he's done his duties, he can kind of let his hair down.
That's fair.
A bit, but I do feel with the recent season, it felt to me then like really it was only it was the back half. It suddenly started to click into place for me what this Doctor's character is. I quite like the fact that he can get a bit teary and have a good old scream of rage. But I very much take your point that there's a bit of a reset goes on between this and Ruby Road.
And meanwhile, Tennant gets for a second time a chance at a quiet life, where he gets split off with Rose all those years ago in that other dimension.
Yeah,
and now he gets a chance to just be the funny uncle with the crazy stories, which is nice and sweet. It's interesting, that's apparently what the Doctor's always wanted, is a quiet life and family, which of course makes him very human and understandable. It does smack a little bit in the face of all this alien that we've learned about for so many years, but hey.
Well, it's the family of blood ending, isn't it? The human nature.
True. Oh, you're right. That's opportunity number 3.
John Smith character, yeah.
Yes, absolutely.
But yeah, it's not necessarily all that in character. I mean, I think it works beautifully as an end to the 60th anniversary. It's a nice end to this story. I'm not sure it bears an awful lot of thinking about, like what's he doing during Sutek's arrival and all that kind of lark.
This thing, I think, that whole conversation between him and between the two Doctors, you get this whole download of info and name drops and things like that, and it's again very different from 2005 approach. It couldn't be more diametrically opposite, really.
Yeah,
for sure.
But I don't know. It's funny you mentioning you making that connection that it's second time around for where we've had the Doctor go off to have a human life kind of thing. Because I was thinking, I made a note. I thought, well, I'd buy the Doctor's rehab thing a bit more if he did have to give up the TARDIS. If we didn't have the magic thing of him having a second TARDIS. But then I thought, maybe even go further. I mean, I know it would retread it, but if the bi-generation had involved that Tennant carried on but was somehow human or mortal, and while Shruti got the Time Lordy bits of things and carried on.
Half human on his Tennant side.
Yes, nicely put. But then that wouldn't really. I'm not sure how much it's been thought through, but my nerd side thinks, okay, this Doctor's got to do is we've got to come back round and go through this loop because we kind of met Shruti in media res as a fully developed Doctor, and we haven't seen Tennant go through, so presumably they have to go around and connect back up on the other side, if you know what I mean. So Tennant's got to do his healing, and then somehow they've got to come back together again and regenerate back into shooting. Oh, I don't know. I can't quite. That's the sort of fanboy side of me overthinking it, and I suspect it's not anything that's ever gonna. We'll just have to make up something. But how can they be the same? There's this niggling bit of me that thinks, how can Shruti have had Tennant's experiences from after the bi-generation in terms of the healing and coming to terms with himself?
That's exactly why I don't.
Is that in the comic? Is that what you're saying?
No. I'm just trying to work out where I feel like we've seen half of the story and we've got to see the other half of it still.
Have they not just diverged forever?
I feel like how can they have, because Shooty, as we meet him, has had experiences that Tennant's doctor has not yet, because he's gone through all the healing and has presumably spent the time on Earth.
Oh, I see what you mean. That Shooty's version is a consequence
Shooty's
of
doctor feels like he
the
comes
one that
from,
lived for however
yes.
long. Having
So he
garden
feels like he
parties.
comes from somewhat later in. If you're going to be, yeah, and it's. I'm aware
No,
that
I
I'm aware that I'm being intensely nerdy and
No,
well,
it's
you're taking
interesting.
things,
I hadn't
being more
considered
analytical
that.
about
I just
it.
took it that the David Tennant's Doctor was its own distinct personality that had problems that
Yeah, I don't know.
didn't.
I feel like there's like a gap, and we meet Shooty.
Yeah, no, that makes
Shooty's doctor
sense.
comes in somewhere in the middle of.
Yeah, how can he heal and then also not heal?
Yeah,
no, I get that.
I don't know whether it's anything they'll resolve or God knows, but it feels at the moment still like there's a half-told story there. But...
I mean, that whole business of listing the battles and saying that it all needs pause for thought. I am not a fan of peering at the format of the show. You just have to quietly ignore the madness.
Yes.
It's like the frequency of murders in Midsummer.
Yes.
Or the fact that the Enterprise has pretty much on average one crazy incident every 2 weeks per year.
Exactly, yeah.
Just don't mention.
Oh, of course, or you.
And so I don't like it when they start saying, "Oh, well, the TARDIS always brings us to a place that needs help," and it's just fine. Just don't put a spotlight on the weird nature of television that needs a weekly adventure serial. Let's just accept that this happens and we like to watch it.
Well, it's a bit like all the memes with Sutek.
Yeah.
With the post this, what was Sutek doing during such and such a story? I think my favourite was the Happiness Patrol one where he turns into a pink poodle.
Yeah. Are we get sort of at a point where we mention one or two more things and sort of bring it to bed, or is somebody got a burning thing they want to talk about?
The only other thing I wanted to mention, and it's not going anywhere necessarily, but I don't know in terms of production which one of these, in terms of the animation, what they were working on first, and so
right.
but I do feel like the animation feels like it's informed by the approach taken in the Giggle to the Toymaker, and I think the two
Gary
dovetail
Russell
very nicely
said on
together.
Facebook that the animation was started long before the Giggle was known about.
Oh, really? Okay. Because they do feel like they dovetail very nicely together, and that the animation does a good job of making that story a companion piece to the Giggle.
It certainly feels like it's the pyramids of Mars to this, in the same way that we got the pyramids of Mars. It tells of the TARDIS. It feels like the animation is a nice opportunity, I suppose, for everyone to understand. I mean, it could simply be, I suppose, that Russell's aware that that's going on, and he thinks, "Oh well, this is a good opportunity, maybe to do the other." There seemed to be a thought that the animation was going to come out a good deal earlier than it actually did. In that it was announced quite early, and then it was, the BFI thing happened in a bit of a hurry, didn't it? And then it was months.
Yes.
It was announced. It happened about 2 weeks later, and then it's sort of 3 or 4 months that the thing actually came out.
Yes.
So I don't know.
I can't remember the scheduling, whether that was might have been partly driven by NFT1 closing for the refurb, so they slotted in the date, think it would be ready, and then flew by the seat of their pants to get there. Don't know.
Anything else from either of you, Jess or Gav?
I don't think so. We may have some connections to try to make. The two stories, but
do we want to talk about Neil Patrick Harris and his role as the Toymaker, perhaps?
I suppose we should.
I mean, I only know him as Doogie Howser from the 90s or whenever that was. So he meant nothing to me other than that. I mean, I could see it was the same actor, but a lot older, obviously.
I know him primarily from How I Met Your Mother, but I'd seen him in Starship Troopers prior to that.
Right.
Oh, of course, yeah.
I think How I Met Your Mother is probably what brought him back into general popularity, I think.
Yeah.
Since then, he's come out and gotten married and has kids and is now like a star and has been on Broadway and or at least in theater as well as TV, etc. So, yeah, he's a surprising American name to appear in this show. Even like after his fame, like we got Andrew Garfield and Carey Mulligan, who then like sort of subsequently found fame after their appearance. This is kind of a big catch, I suppose. So, and he's great.
Dr. Horrible as well.
Yeah.
Quite, yes.
It's a charismatic performance, I think. I mean, it's almost a shame that it ends so quickly. I mean, I don't know where else it would go, but I'm certainly enjoying it, I think, and then it's suddenly all over.
Yes, but he give it a real go with the accents and as much dancing as he did. I know he had a double, but as much dancing as he did was pretty impressive.
Yeah, well, I mean, they mention that he's got the singing, the dancing, the card work, the puppetry, the juggling. So he's showing off lots of his skills.
Well, then he was great casting then.
Okay, I mean, if we want to move to the bit where we talk about links, have you got some that you want to talk about? I've got a few. I mean, we've gone through some of these. The fact that the games are banal in both stories, so there's definitely a link there. We don't get a very good game in any of them. We've got two companions, Dodo and Stephen. We can add Mel and Donna. In the end, it's sort of a trick. In both cases, as a toy maker is defeated, he doesn't seem to have seen it coming. As you say, it's not entirely clear why he doesn't catch the ball. He sort of feels like he's in absolute control until suddenly he isn't.
Why didn't he just make his hand bigger?
Yeah, yeah, like in Wild Blue Yonder.
That would have been quite good if he'd actually thrown. If they had tried to throw the ball, throw it wide, and he's done a Mr. Fantastic with his hands, and suddenly just reached out and caught it. That would have plugged that plot hole.
Sure. Change of lead actor. So I mean, it almost happened in Celestial.
Yes, I was going to say it's a near miss.
Yes. and it's an unusual way here as well. It's not at the end of the story. It's in the middle, and it happens in an unusual way. As far as we understand, he was going to become invisible and then return with a new face. But I guess in a rather bad way, I suppose it would have been a recasting rather than a regeneration if that had been followed through.
Yes,
probably would have killed the series.
Hard to imagine a time when regeneration hadn't been invented and ways of recasting were up in the air.
Yes.
Obviously, as you mentioned, Neil Patrick Harris's version of the Toymaker shows card game skills, and we have the Hart family in the Toymaker, but also in the Maze of Corridors, in the Giggle, all of the lampshades have playing card motifs, which I thought was a nice detail.
Yes.
We get the Jerry the Clown sign, don't we?
Yes, on the Toymaker shop.
Yes, yeah.
All of the clown iconography, I'd forgotten that. I was going to say a nearly link in the original version of the Celestial Toymaker. In Brian Hales' second draft, there was a maze, and that had to be written out because the maze was used to deliver a couple of set pieces which were decided that they were too expensive or too difficult to realise, so they got written out and replaced. So it's kind of fun, ironic that the maze of confusing corridors is reinstated in the Giggle. And again, it leads to these little set pieces where you've got dolls that come to life and people turned into toys, which is reflected in the Toymaker.
Brian Hales is often portrayed, that his script is in some way a failure because it's had to be rewritten so extensively, and yet, while they're still shooting this, they commission him to go off and write The Smugglers, and they want the scripts to be delivered in a heck of a hurry. So, I mean, I don't know what Donald Tosh and John Wells thought of him, but clearly Jerry Davis is a fan, or at least sees him as a guy who could do a job anyway.
Yeah, everyone was very happy with Brian Hales' work, and it seems that Donald Tosh tweaked it, and then Jerry Davis not only didn't like Donald Tosh's tweaks, but the foundations that they were built on, which was the George and Margaret inclusion, had to go. So it seems that Hales is absolved from blame in all elements of that necessary rewriting.
And of course, he kept on going back to the idea, didn't he? Pitching, didn't he, have the Celestial Toymaker's sister? Something like that, Queen of Time. Isn't that one of his lost Troughton? Is it a Troughton script?
I don't remember that.
I have to look that up now.
We already mentioned the dancing idea.
Yeah.
I was trying to remember if the card that the Toymaker cuts is the King of Hearts.
Ooh.
It is definitely a king.
It's definitely a king.
In my memory. And there's obviously 2 red suits to choose from, but I feel like it might be. I have to confirm that. Flowers. Dodo's given flowers in episode 1, and all the bullets turn to flowers.
Yeah.
Obscure, but true.
Yes, it is the King of Hearts.
Very good, thank you.
At least according to the transcript I have in front of me.
All right.
Yes, Big Finish have apparently done an adaptation of the Queen of Time.
All right.
It was. I'm just trying to find the original.
I wonder how developed. I guess that was just a story outline.
I'm trying to find that. Yeah, I guess so. Don't think it really got any
There's
further.
almost 0 scripts of unmade stories. I think The Prison in Space might be one of a very small handful that we've got a full script for.
Yes.
Oh, I see.
Farewell, Great Macedon. A handful. And looking at Shannon Sullivan's wonderful site, just because he will have a fairly short summary. The TARDIS is captured by Hecuba, the Queen of Time, sister of the Celestial Toymaker, who has romantic designs on the Doctor.
Ooh.
This was apparently pitched for season 5. She challenges him to a series of contests against figures from history, including Copernicus and Nostradamus, while her servants Snap and Drag bedevil Jamie and Victoria with a variety of time-themed perils, such as being trapped inside a giant hourglass. So this sounds like it was a pretty quick retread of Toymaker.
And not dissimilar to elements of the Mind Robber.
No, that too, yeah.
So he trapped in a jar.
Yes, yeah, I was thinking about that. And as I think I said way back when we did the Mind Robber, it's a bit ironic. There's they run into issues with Frank Richards over the whole Betty Bunter thing. The next time they do a really weird, off-the-wall, Land of Fiction style, different dimension take, they actually make Frank Richards into a character effectively. Because the master of the Land of Fiction being pretty obviously Frank Richards.
Oh, right. I didn't know that.
Yeah. That's why, because he was such a prolific author. So it's all it's a riff on him, and there are pictures of him wearing a very similar hat. He was one of those types who like to hang around in a dressing gown and one of those sort of hats.
Did he have a bit of spittle in the corner of his mouth as well?
Are you ready to bring this to a halt? No, go on, Jess.
I was just going to say one tiny thing, although it's not connected to Celestial Toymaker, the period in history where we meet the Toymaker is 1925, which is the same year that we meet Maestro, where Maestro is emerges from the piano. It's given the same. I think it's given a more specific date in The Devil's Chord, but it is the same year. So that's when it all went wrong. 1925.
Yeah.
Interesting.
The 20th century, it's when everything changes. Okay. Well, look, thanks for listening to Something Who. If you've enjoyed this episode, then please subscribe, rate, and review our podcast. And please tell us what you liked about it as well. And if you check out our feed, there are plenty of others for you to listen to while you're waiting for the next one to come along. Also, if you've enjoyed what you've heard, then please tell your friends, your family, your colleagues, your neighbours, and anyone else who might be game. But if you hate us, don't tell a soul. We typically make new recordings of Something Who about once a month, but it is just a fun thing we do in our spare time. So please be patient with us if it takes a little longer. And we'll be back soon, we hope, with more thoughts on Doctor Who, old and new. But for now, Jess and Gav and Giles, thanks for your thoughts and your company. It's been great to chat with you about these two stories.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Really enjoyed it. Bye.
So long.
Bye.
Cheerio.
I was trying to find a horn sound effect to play, but I can't find the right one.
Oh, it must be somewhere.
Right.
Stop. I don't know where you're going to put that whole long chat. That's a lot of stuff, not about
Yes.
the Toymaker stuff.
Well, we'll find
It's
a way.
It's interesting for sure. I'm glad we did it.
We ended up, going a bit further down the rabbit hole than I just,
Yeah.
I just thought, oh well, things that have happened since last, the last we convened.
Well, the pod. Go on.
Sorry,
Go
I
on,
was just
Jess.
going to say it was actually good for me to return to the Giggle because I made a bunch of connections with the complete series, not the specials. But
Yes,
some of those connections I hadn't made because I hadn't gone back and watched it. So that part was good, and I felt a little bit more of a fresh appreciation to the season one, if that's what we're calling it, series one.
Well, I think it's interesting that because I mean this. I think the podcasts are conversations. It's interesting. We've just had a conversation without any notes for 20-25 minutes that flowed pretty well. Yeah, maybe there's something in that. We don't necessarily always need the guardrails.
We'll start doing it with notes now, and we'll fall apart completely.
I do.
Unusually, I don't actually have many notes for Toymaker.
Yeah,